December 15th had become a date I dreaded. Not because of the cold. Not because of the dark winter mornings or the gray sky pressing against the windows of my home office, but because of the number on my computer screen. $50,000. The same amount I had wired every single year for the past 6 years. My fingers hovered above the keyboard as the banking page glowed softly in front of me, the cursor blinking in the empty confirmation box like it was impatient, like it already knew what I would do. It always did. Every December 15th. $50,000 to Mark Reynolds, my late daughter Emily's husband. I leaned back slowly in my chair, rubbing my palms together as if I could warm them. But it wasn't the cold that made my hands shake. It was the ritual. 6 years ago, when Emily died, the money had made sense. At least that's what I told myself. Mark had come to me during those awful weeks after the funeral, his voice raw, his eyes hollow. He told me Emily had wanted security for Lily, for their future. He told me she worried about leaving them with nothing. I had believed him. Or maybe I had simply needed something to believe. Something that made her death feel less final. So the first year I wired the money, then the second, then the third, and somehow, without me ever consciously deciding it, the payment became tradition. A quiet, private ritual of grief. But this year, something felt wrong. The office around me was silent except for the soft hum of the heater. Dust floated in the pale winter sunlight spilling through the window. The scent of old books and paper filled the room. And faintly, so faintly I sometimes wondered if it was just my imagination. I thought I could still smell Emily's perfume. Vanilla and jasmine. She used to wear it every Sunday when she visited. I swallowed hard and looked back at the screen. The numbers hadn't changed. $50,000. I checked the routing number again, then the account, then the confirmation page. Everything was exactly the same as the last 6 years. So why did my chest feel tight? Why did my stomach twist like something inside me was screaming not to press the button? A memory flickered through my mind. Emily standing in my kitchen years ago, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear while laughing about something Mark had said. She loved him. That part was never in doubt. But near the end, something had changed. I remembered one argument in particular. She had been quiet that night, unusually quiet. When I asked if everything was okay, she had forced a smile and said, "Mom, just trust him, but watch carefully." At the time, I had laughed it off. Now the memory made my skin crawl. The cursor blinked again, waiting. My finger moved toward the mouse, and that was when the phone rang. The sound cut through the room like a knife. I jumped. My heart thudded as I glanced at the screen. For a moment, I almost ignored it. But then I saw the name. Lily. My granddaughter, Emily's daughter. The one bright light that had survived the darkness of those years. I grabbed the phone quickly and pressed answer. "Hello!" For a moment, there was only silence. Then a small voice, barely above a whisper. "Grandma!" My chest tightened instantly. Lily was usually cheerful, energetic, talking so fast she sometimes tripped over her own words. But today, her voice sounded thin, scared. "Lily," I said gently. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Another pause, long enough that I felt something cold slide down my spine. When she spoke again, her voice trembled. "Grandma, can I tell you something?" "Of course you can." Her breathing crackled softly through the phone. Then she said something that made the world stop. "Grandma, I saw him giving the money to someone else." My hand froze. The mouse slipped from my fingers and clattered softly against the desk. "What?" I whispered. "I didn't mean to see it," Lily said quickly. "I was waiting after school and Dad didn't know I was there, and he met this man and he gave him a big envelope and—" "Lily," I interrupted softly, my pulse hammering. "Are you talking about your father?" "Yes." The room seemed to tilt. The computer screen blurred in front of me. On it, the bank transfer still waited. $50,000, waiting to be sent. "To someone else," I said slowly. Lily's voice dropped even lower. "I heard them talking," she whispered. "What did they say?" They said the money should keep things quiet. The words hit me like ice water. Keep things quiet. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The heater hummed softly. The cursor blinked. Blink, blink, blink. I stared at the transfer screen. 6 years, 6 payments, $300,000. A horrible thought began to form in the back of my mind. What if the money had never been for Lily? What if it had never been for Emily's wishes at all? What if I had been funding something else entirely? Something Mark didn't want anyone to know about. "Grandma," Lily said nervously. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you mad?" "No," I said quickly, though my heart was pounding. "Of course not." I forced my voice to stay calm. "Lily, when did you see this?" "Last week," she said. "And the man your father met, did you recognize him?" "No." My fingers tightened around the phone. "What did he look like?" "I couldn't see very well," she said. "But Grandma, they were arguing." The words sent a chill through me. "Arguing about what?" Another pause. Then Lily whispered something that made my blood run cold. "The man said if Dad didn't keep paying, people might start asking questions about Mom." My breath caught in my throat. Emily, my daughter, dead 6 years, and somehow still part of whatever Mark was hiding. The computer screen glowed quietly in front of me, still waiting, still expecting me to send the money. But suddenly the transaction didn't feel like a tribute anymore. It felt like a trap. I slowly moved my hand away from the mouse. The cursor kept blinking, patient, expectant. But for the first time in 6 years, I didn't press send, because somewhere deep inside me, a terrifying realization was beginning to take shape. If Lily was telling the truth, then for 6 years, I hadn't been honoring my daughter's memory. I had been financing a secret. And whatever Mark was hiding, it was big enough to make grown men argue in parking lots, big enough to make a child whisper in fear, and possibly big enough to explain why Emily had once looked at me with worried eyes and said, "Trust him, but watch carefully." I stared at the bank screen, my heart pounding louder with every second. Then Lily spoke again, very quietly. "Grandma." "Yes," her voice trembled. "I think Dad knows I saw them." And suddenly, the ritual that had comforted me for 6 years no longer felt like grief. It felt like danger. Even after Lily hung up, I didn't move. The phone rested in my hand, warm from my grip, while the silence in the room thickened until it felt almost solid. My eyes remained fixed on the computer screen where the unfinished bank transfer waited patiently, the cursor blinking in a slow, relentless rhythm. Blink, blink, blink. $50,000. 6 years. $300,000 sent in the name of love, grief, and loyalty to a daughter who was no longer here to tell me whether I had done the right thing. But the moment Lily whispered those words, my mind had drifted somewhere else entirely. Back to Emily. It always did. No matter how much time passed, no matter how carefully I tried to move forward, every important moment still seemed to circle back to her. To the memory of her voice echoing in the kitchen, her footsteps racing up the stairs 2 at a time, the way she used to laugh with her whole body when something genuinely amused her. Emily had never known how to be quiet. Not emotionally, at least. She was the kind of person who filled a room the moment she entered it. People noticed her immediately, not because she demanded attention, but because she radiated something warm and bright that made others feel comfortable just standing near her. As a child, she had been fearless. I remembered one afternoon when she was 7 years old, climbing halfway up the giant oak tree in our backyard, while I stood below shouting for her to come down before she broke something. Instead of listening, she simply grinned down at me and said, "Relax, Mom, I've got this." That was Emily, always certain she could handle whatever life threw at her, and most of the time she could. But loving Emily had always come with a quiet fear, because the same boldness that made her extraordinary also made her vulnerable. She loved people deeply, trusted them instinctively, and believed the best in everyone even when they hadn't earned it, especially when it came to Mark. The first time she introduced him to me, she was glowing. I could still see the moment clearly. It had been a summer evening. The sun was setting behind the house, casting golden light across the backyard where Emily had insisted on hosting a barbecue. She had walked across the lawn holding his hand, excitement practically vibrating through her. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "this is Mark." He had smiled politely, shaking my hand with confidence. At first glance, he seemed perfectly charming. Polite, well-spoken, attentive. The kind of man mothers are supposed to feel relieved about, and for a while I did, but something about him had always been difficult to define. Not wrong exactly, just calculated. Mark had a way of watching people carefully while pretending not to. A way of listening that felt less like interest and more like assessment, as though every conversation was something he filed away for later use. At the time, I dismissed the feeling as protectiveness. After all, no one ever seems good enough for your daughter. Still, the unease never completely disappeared. Over the years, I began noticing small things, little inconsistencies, tiny shifts in behavior that were easy to ignore individually, but harder to dismiss when you place them side by side. Emily would occasionally grow quiet when Mark entered a room, not frightened, just cautious. Sometimes she would take phone calls outside rather than speaking in front of him. Other times, I caught fleeting expressions on her face, moments of frustration she quickly smoothed over whenever he looked her way. Once, about a year before Lily was born, Emily had come over for dinner alone. That in itself wasn't unusual, but she had been restless all evening, tapping her fingers on the kitchen table while pretending to listen to my stories. Finally, I asked her what was wrong. She hesitated before answering. "Nothing's wrong," she said. Then, after a pause, she added quietly, "Mark just likes to handle things his own way." At the time, I thought she meant finances or household decisions, normal relationship disagreements. I never imagined it could mean something deeper, something darker. My gaze drifted across the office now, landing on a small framed photo sitting on the bookshelf beside my desk. Emily and Lily. The picture had been taken at Lily's 6th birthday party. Emily was kneeling behind her daughter with her arms wrapped around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something just outside the camera's frame. Mark had taken that photo. I remembered because he had insisted everyone else step aside so he could capture the moment properly. I stood slowly and walked over to the shelf. My fingers brushed lightly over the glass. Emily looked so alive in that picture, so certain the future would unfold the way she planned. But now, as Lily's whisper echoed in my memory, another moment surfaced. One I hadn't thought about in years. It had happened during Emily's final months, back when the doctors still used hopeful words like treatment and recovery. One evening, I visited her at the hospital after Mark had stepped out to take a call. Emily looked exhausted, but her eyes were sharp, focused. She reached for my hand and squeezed it tightly. "Mom," she said quietly. "Yes, sweetheart. If anything ever happens to me, I need you to promise something." My throat tightened. "You're not going anywhere." She smiled faintly. "Just promise." I nodded. "What is it?" She glanced toward the door to make sure Mark wasn't coming back. Then she leaned closer and whispered something that had confused me at the time. "Mark can be persuasive," she said. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Emily hesitated. Then she said the words that now echoed through my mind like a warning I had failed to hear. "Trust him, but watch carefully." At the time, I thought she meant marriage was complicated, that she was simply asking me not to interfere too much. But now, standing in my office with Lily's frightened voice still ringing in my ears, those words felt completely different. They felt like a message, a warning, one I had misunderstood for 6 long years. My chest tightened as another memory surfaced. During Emily's final week, Mark had spoken to me privately in the hospital hallway. He looked devastated, exhausted, broken. "I don't know how I'll take care of Lily without Emily," he said quietly. I remember placing my hand on his shoulder. "You won't be alone," I assured him. And that was the moment everything began, the moment he planted the seed. Later, after Emily was gone, he came to me with the idea of the yearly transfers. Emily wanted stability for Lily, he explained gently. She was worried about the future. Grief had clouded my thinking. I wanted to help, wanted to do something that felt meaningful. So I agreed. And every year after that, I wired the money, never questioning, never doubting, until today, until Lily whispered the words that shattered the illusion. Grandma, I saw him giving the money to someone else. The office suddenly felt colder. The photo frame in my hand trembled slightly as a horrifying possibility settled over me. What if Emily hadn't asked me to trust Mark? What if she had been trying to warn me? And what if, for 6 years, I had been honoring the wrong promise? The first thing I did after hanging up with Lily was stare at the bank screen. I didn't blink. I barely breathed. The transfer page sat open on my laptop exactly where I had left it, the cursor blinking patiently beside the confirmation button like it had a pulse of its own. Blink, blink, blink. 6 years of routine had trained my body well. Every December 15th, my hands followed the same quiet ritual. I would open the account, confirm Mark's routing number, enter the amount, $50,000 exactly, and press send before I could think too much about it. Then I would close the laptop, close the office door, and try not to think about why I was doing it. But that day, my hand refused to move. Lily's voice echoed in my head. Grandma, I saw him giving the money to someone else. Children misunderstand things all the time. That was the first explanation my mind reached for, the safest one. Maybe she had seen him paying someone for repairs. Maybe it was a contractor. Maybe a donation. Maybe Emily had arranged something years ago that I simply didn't know about. There had to be a logical explanation. There always was. But another voice, quieter, colder, slipped into my thoughts. Then why did she whisper? I slowly closed the transfer window without pressing send. The second the screen disappeared, my heart began to pound. It felt wrong, like breaking a rule. For 6 years, the money had always been sent before noon. Mark knew that. He noticed things like that. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my temples, trying to organize the chaos swirling through my head. If Lily was right, then I needed answers. But charging at Mark with accusations would be a mistake. I had seen how he handled confrontation before. He could be charming when he wanted to be, warm, funny, generous. But when cornered, he changed. The charm turned sharp. Questions became accusations. And somehow, the person asking them always ended up apologizing. Emily had once joked that Mark could talk his way out of a locked room. At the time, I had laughed. Now the memory made my stomach twist. Instead of calling him immediately, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a thick folder I hadn't touched in years. Every transfer confirmation was inside, neatly organized. 6 Decembers, 6 identical payments. I spread them across the desk. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, $300,000. Seeing the number written out like that made my throat tighten. Back then, it had never felt like money. It had felt like duty. Emily had never asked directly for the transfers, not in a contract or a will. But during those final weeks in the hospital, everything she said carried the weight of urgency. I remembered one afternoon clearly. The room had been quiet except for the slow beep of the heart monitor beside her bed. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, striping the white sheets in soft gold lines. Emily looked so small against the pillows, but her eyes were still sharp, still determined. She reached for my hand. "Mom," she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. If things get hard for Mark, promise me you won't let him struggle." I had squeezed her fingers gently. "Of course I won't." At the time, I thought she meant emotionally. Grief, loneliness, raising Lily alone. But now, sitting in my office 6 years later, I wasn't sure what she had meant at all. I stared down at the pile of transfer confirmations again. $300,000. Had I misunderstood her completely? Or worse, had someone helped me misunderstand? My eyes drifted toward my phone sitting on the desk. Mark's contact photo stared back at me from the screen. It was an old picture taken years ago at a beach barbecue. Emily stood beside him, laughing at something outside the frame while the wind blew strands of hair across her face. Mark had one arm draped casually around her shoulders. He looked relaxed, confident, the kind of man people trusted without thinking twice. I picked up the phone before I could talk myself out of it and pressed call. The ringing seemed louder than usual in the quiet office. One ring, two, three, then his voice answered. "Margaret, I was actually just thinking about you." My grip tightened around the phone. That was classic Mark. Friendly first. Always friendly. "Were you?" I asked. "Of course," he said with a chuckle. "You know what time of year it is." I glanced at the dark laptop screen. "Yes," I said, "I do." There was a small pause, then he continued casually. "I was actually wondering if everything was okay. The transfer usually comes through by noon." His tone remained light, but beneath it was something unmistakable. Expectation, like someone waiting for a scheduled delivery. "I'm working on it," I said carefully. "Just reviewing some things first." "Reviewing," he repeated, amused. "Margaret, you've never needed to review anything before." My chest tightened slightly. He wasn't wrong. That had always been the arrangement. No questions, no oversight, just trust. "Well," I said slowly, 6 years is a long time. I suppose I'm just being cautious." The silence that followed was brief, but noticeable. When Mark spoke again, his voice had shifted slightly. Still polite, but sharper. "Is something wrong?" This was the moment where most people made mistakes. They either lied too quickly or revealed too much. I chose the middle. "I was just wondering how things have been lately," I said. "Financially," he exhaled softly. "Oh, you know, life's expensive these days. Lily's school costs, house repairs, medical bills here and there." The answer came easily. Too easily. "What repairs?" I asked. Another pause. "Just normal house stuff," he said. "Roof maintenance, plumbing, nothing exciting." I glanced down at the stack of transfer confirmations. $300,000. "That must have been expensive," I said. "Well," he replied, "owning a house always is." I let a few seconds pass. Then I asked quietly, "How's Lily doing?" "She's great," he said immediately. "Growing up fast." "You know kids." "Yes," I said softly. "They notice things." The silence that followed was different. He didn't answer right away. Then he laughed, but the sound was thinner than before. "Margaret, what exactly are you asking?" The friendliness was fading now. "I'm asking," I said gently, "whether the money has been helping." "Of course it has. Every year, yes. Without exception." This time the pause stretched longer. When he finally spoke, there was an edge in his voice. "Margaret, is this about something someone told you?" My pulse jumped. That was fast. Too fast, so he was already thinking defensively. Interesting. "No," I said calmly. "Why would you think that?" Another pause. "Because," he replied slowly, "this suddenly sounds like an interrogation." I forced a small laugh. "Oh, Mark, don't be dramatic. I'm just asking how you're doing." His tone softened again, though not completely. "Well, I'm doing what I can, like everyone else." Then he added something that made my stomach twist. "Emily trusted me, Margaret. You know that." The sentence landed heavily. Not "thank you," not "we appreciate your help," just a reminder. Emily trusted him, which meant questioning him meant questioning her. It was a clever move. He had always been good at that kind of emotional leverage. "Yes," I said quietly. "She did." A few seconds passed in silence. Then he spoke again. "So, should I expect the transfer today?" There it was, expectation, routine. Confidence. I looked at the blank laptop screen. Then I did something that surprised even me. "I think I'll send it tomorrow," I said. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "Tomorrow," he repeated. "Yes," I replied calmly. "Just finishing up some paperwork." When he spoke again, his voice was slower, controlled. Well, I suppose that's fine. But he didn't sound fine, not even close. We exchanged a few more polite words before ending the call. When the line finally went dead, the office felt eerily quiet. But something had changed. For the first time in 6 years, I had delayed the ritual, and Mark had noticed immediately, which meant one thing. He wasn't just grateful for the money, he was counting on it. I sat there replaying every second of the conversation in my mind. The quick defenses, the careful tone shifts, the way he invoked Emily the moment I questioned him. Then another thought crept in. If Mark reacted this strongly to a single day's delay, what would he do if the money stopped entirely? I was still staring at the dark laptop screen when my phone buzzed. A new message from Lily appeared. 3 words. "Grandma, I'm scared." My heart dropped, because suddenly this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about what Lily had seen, and whether Mark knew that she had seen it. Module 4, Lily's proof. I called Lily immediately. The phone rang only once before she answered, which told me something was wrong before she even spoke. Normally, Lily let the phone ring while she finished whatever she was doing. Homework, music, texting friends. But this time she picked up right away. "Grandma," her voice was small, too small. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said gently. "You said you were scared. What happened?" There was a rustling sound on the line, like fabric brushing against a phone. Then a door clicked softly. "I'm in my room," Lily whispered. "Dad's downstairs." The way she said Dad made something inside my chest tighten. "Okay," I said calmly. "You're safe, just take your time. Tell me what you saw." For a moment, she didn't answer. I could hear her breathing through the phone, short, uneven breaths like she was trying not to panic. Then she spoke. "It happened last week," she said. "After school." My grip tightened around the phone. "Go on." "I was walking home with my friend Hannah," Lily continued. "We cut through the parking lot behind the grocery store because it's faster." I pictured the place instantly. A cracked asphalt lot behind an aging building, half hidden from the street by dumpsters and delivery trucks. Not somewhere people usually stopped unless they had a reason. "And I saw Dad there," she said. That alone wouldn't have meant much. But something about the way she said it made my pulse quicken. "What was he doing?" I asked. "He was talking to someone." "Who?" "A woman." A chill crept slowly down my spine. "What kind of woman?" "I don't know," Lily said quickly. "Older than him maybe, or maybe just older than me. She had dark hair and this big leather bag." I leaned back slowly in my chair. "That's all?" "No," Lily whispered. My stomach dropped. "He gave her something." The word something hung in the air between us. I forced my voice to stay steady. "What did he give her?" "I couldn't see at first," Lily said. "They were standing by his car. Then he opened the trunk and took out an envelope." My throat went dry. "Was it big?" "Yeah." "Did you see what was inside?" She hesitated. Then she said the words that made my heart slam painfully against my ribs. "It was cash, Grandma." I closed my eyes for a moment. "How do you know that?" "Because the envelope ripped a little when he handed it to her," Lily said. "And the money slid out a bit. I saw stacks." Stacks. My mind immediately jumped to the number on my bank screen earlier that day. $50,000. "Are you sure it was your father?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she said firmly. "It was his car. And I saw his face." "Did he see you?" "No," her voice dropped lower. "But the woman did." A cold ripple spread through my body. "What do you mean?" "She looked right at me," Lily whispered. "What did she do?" "She stared for a second." Lily paused. Then she added something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Then she smiled." The way Lily said smiled made it sound like something unpleasant, not friendly, not warm, just knowing. "Did she say anything?" I asked. "No," Lily said, "but Dad noticed her looking at me." "And what did he do?" He asked her what she was staring at. And she just said nothing. Then they both got into their cars and left. The room around me felt smaller somehow. "Lily," I said carefully, "have you ever seen that woman before?" "No." "Did your father say anything about it later?" "No." Another pause. Then Lily whispered something that made my pulse spike again. But that's not the weird part. I sat up straight. What do you mean? I checked the mailbox later that night. And there was another envelope, she said quietly. Where? On the kitchen counter. My heart began pounding again. What kind of envelope? The same kind, Lily said. My fingers tightened around the phone. What was in it? I don't know, she said quickly. But Dad took it into his office. And then he opened the safe. That stopped me cold. Mark had always insisted he never kept cash in the house, said it was dangerous. So he has a safe now? I asked. Yeah, Lily replied. He got it last year. Did he say why? He said it was for important documents. Of course he did. I inhaled slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. Lily, you did the right thing telling me. I almost didn't, she admitted quietly. Why not? Because Dad gets really weird when people ask about money. A knot tightened in my stomach. What do you mean by weird? He gets angry, she said. Not yelling, just cold. I knew that tone. Emily had once described it to me years ago. When Mark's angry, he doesn't shout. He just makes the room feel smaller. Has he ever been like that with you? I asked gently. Only once. My breath caught. What happened? I asked why he needed your money every year. And what did he say? He said it was none of my business. That alone was bad enough. But Lily wasn't finished. And then he said something else. What? Her voice dropped so low I almost didn't hear it. He said people who stick their noses into adult problems usually regret it. My knuckles turned white around the phone. That's when I stopped asking questions. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy. Then Lily said softly, Grandma, is Dad in trouble? I swallowed. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But you think something's wrong, don't you? Yes. Another pause. Are you going to tell him I told you? She asked nervously. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Relief flooded her voice. Okay, Lily, I continued gently. From now on, I need you to be careful. How? If you see anything unusual, anything at all, you tell me. I will. But don't confront him. Don't ask questions. I won't. I hesitated before asking one last thing. The envelope he gave the woman, was it thick? Yeah. How thick? Like a lot of money. My chest tightened again. Because earlier that morning, before Lily called, I had almost sent another $50,000. 6 years. $300,000. And now there was proof that Mark was handing thick envelopes of cash to strangers in parking lots. But the thing that unsettled me most wasn't the money. It was the woman, and the way she had looked at Lily. Not surprised, not curious, just aware. As if she already knew exactly who Lily was. After we hung up, I sat alone in the quiet house staring at the stack of transfer records on my desk. Something inside me shifted. For 6 years, I had operated on trust. Now I would operate on evidence. Because if Lily was telling the truth, and I believed she was, then Mark wasn't just hiding something. He was running something. And a new, terrifying thought began forming in the back of my mind. What if the money I'd been sending him was never meant for him at all? And if that was true, who had really been receiving it all these years? That night, I didn't really sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Lily's words replayed in my mind again and again, like a recording stuck on a loop. The envelope, the woman, the safe in Mark's office. Each detail floated through my thoughts like a puzzle piece someone had scattered across the floor. I could see fragments of something larger taking shape, but none of them connected yet. And the worst part was this. Mark had no idea I was even looking at the puzzle. That gave me an advantage, but only if I used it carefully. By the time morning arrived, I had already made my decision. If Mark was hiding something, charging at him with accusations would only drive him deeper into whatever he was protecting. No. The fastest way to uncover the truth wasn't confrontation. It was observation. So I did exactly what Mark expected me to do. At 10:14 a.m., I opened my banking page, entered the familiar numbers, confirmed the account, and sent the transfer. $50,000. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. I stared at the screen longer than usual before closing the laptop. Because this time, the money wasn't charity. It was bait. At 10:37 a.m., my phone rang. Mark, of course. I let it ring twice before answering. "Margaret," he said warmly. "I just saw the transfer come through. Thank you, really." His voice sounded noticeably lighter than it had the day before. Relieved. "You're welcome," I replied calmly. "You know how much this helps," he continued. "Emily would have appreciated you keeping things steady." There it was again. Emily's name. Mark used it like armor every time money came up. A shield made from grief. "I hope it helps," I said quietly. "Oh, it definitely does," he said quickly. "Things have been tight lately." "Tight how?" I asked. There was a slight pause. "Just life stuff," he said. "House repairs, school expenses for Lily. You know how it is." Interesting. Because according to Lily, just a week earlier Mark had handed a thick envelope of cash to a stranger in a grocery store parking lot. "That sounds stressful," I said. "It is," he sighed. "But we manage." Another small silence. Then he added casually, "I might actually need to withdraw part of it today." My pulse jumped. "Today?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I've got a payment coming up." A payment, not a bill. Not an expense, a payment. "What kind of payment?" I asked lightly. Mark chuckled. "You're starting to sound like my accountant." "Humor me." Another pause. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "Just a private arrangement." Private arrangement. The phrase lingered in the air like smoke. "With who?" I asked. His voice sharpened slightly. "Margaret, you trust me, don't you?" There it was, the pivot. Instead of answering the question, he questioned my trust. Classic deflection. "I do," I said evenly. "I just like understanding where things go." "Everything I do is for Lily," he said quickly. The words came out with practiced sincerity. And for a moment, I almost believed them. Almost. But Lily herself had told me something very different. "I'm glad to hear that," I replied. Mark's voice softened again. "Look, Margaret, I know the last few years have been hard for all of us." He paused before continuing. "But Emily believed in taking care of family. That's what this arrangement is about." Arrangement. Not help. Not support. Arrangement. The word lodged itself firmly in my mind. "What kind of arrangement?" I asked. This time the silence lasted longer. When Mark finally spoke again, his voice had changed. Still polite, but colder. "You're asking a lot of questions today." "Yes," I said calmly. "Why?" I leaned back in my chair, because this was the moment where pressure begins to crack a mask. "Because 6 years is a long time," I said quietly. And sometimes it's worth revisiting old agreements." Mark exhaled slowly. "You think something's wrong." Not a question, a statement. "I think things change," I replied. "Well, nothing's changed here," he said firmly. Another lie. I could feel it now. Because if nothing had changed, Lily wouldn't be whispering from behind a locked bedroom door like she was hiding from something. "If you say so," I answered. A few seconds passed. Then Mark asked suddenly, "You didn't talk to Lily, did you?" My heart skipped. The question came too fast, too sharp, which meant one thing: he was already worried about what Lily might know. "No," I said evenly. "Why would I?" Another pause. "Just wondering," he said, but the friendliness was gone now, replaced by something more alert, more cautious. "Well," he continued after a moment, "I've got to run. I have a meeting this afternoon." A meeting. Another interesting word. "With the person you're making that payment to?" I asked. Silence. Then Mark laughed. "You really are in detective mode today." "Just curious." "Well, don't worry," he said lightly. "Everything's under control." The call ended a few moments later, but that phrase stayed in my mind long after. Everything's under control. People usually say that when they're afraid something might slip out of control. I sat quietly at my desk replaying every second of the conversation. Every pause, every word choice, every careful deflection. And slowly, one thing became clear. Mark wasn't just hiding something, he was managing something. Something structured, something regular, something that required large envelopes of cash. Then my phone buzzed. A new message from Lily appeared on the screen, just one sentence. "Grandma, Dad just left the house with a big envelope." My chest tightened, because the transfer had arrived less than an hour ago, which meant Mark hadn't hesitated. He already knew exactly where that money was going. And suddenly the situation between us no longer felt theoretical. The game had started. Mark thought he was still in control, but he had no idea that the quiet woman sending him money every December had finally started watching him. The moment Lily's message appeared, something inside me hardened. For 6 years, grief had been my compass. Every decision I'd made circled back to Emily, her memory, her wishes, the promise I thought I was keeping. But grief clouds judgment. Evidence doesn't. I typed carefully. Did he say where he was going? The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. No, but he took the black envelope, the thick one. Black envelope, that was new. Did you see him put anything else in the car? I asked. A pause. His laptop bag and the safe key. The safe key. Whatever Mark was doing, this wasn't casual. It wasn't a bill, a donation, or a simple payment. It was deliberate, planned, calculated. I stared at the thread, my mind racing, moving through possibilities like a chess player thinking 5 moves ahead. If the envelope left the house immediately after the transfer cleared, then the money wasn't just spent, it was delivered. Which meant 2 things: this wasn't spontaneous. Someone was expecting it, regularly. And if that was true, there had to be a trail, a pattern, a record. I spent the next hour at the dining table with 6 years of statements spread out before me. Every December transfer highlighted. Every note I'd scribbled carefully preserved. I started to compare them. Dates, times, patterns. The first 3 years were straightforward. December 15, transfer sent, Mark sent a polite thank you. Sometimes a photo of Lily smiling. Updates about school, normal family things. But then, year 4, the message changed. Got it, everything's handled. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Now my stomach twisted. That wasn't gratitude, that was confirmation. Transaction acknowledged, obligation fulfilled. Year 5, received, taking care of it today. Year 6, all set, appreciate you keeping this going. Never once did he explain what this actually was. For 6 years, I'd funded something Mark treated as routine. Something that left traces. Something with deadlines. By late afternoon, I'd opened every email he'd ever sent me. Birthday greetings, holiday photos, Lily's school concerts. Innocuous, everyday. Buried beneath the ordinary, I began to see the gaps. Weeks of silence. Emails sent at odd hours. Patterns that didn't align with ordinary family life. And then it clicked. 3 years ago, Mark had sent one email. "Margaret, quick question, would it ever be possible to send the transfer a few days earlier? Just asking because timing can get tight on my end." Timing. Not bills, not expenses. Timing. The money had a schedule. A recipient expecting it exactly when it arrived. I checked the bank logs. Every transfer I'd sent had been withdrawn in cash within 24 hours. Every single one. People don't withdraw $50,000 in cash unless they're hiding something. My phone buzzed. Lily. "Grandma, I think he's back." "Already?" "Yeah, but something's weird." "What do you mean?" I typed. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then reappeared. Finally, "He's arguing with someone on the phone." A chill slid down my spine. "Can you hear what he's saying?" I asked. Another pause, then the next message. "He keeps saying the same thing." My pulse spiked. "What thing?" The answer came slowly, deliberately. "He said, 'The money came in, just relax.'" The sentence confirmed my worst fears. Mark wasn't spending the money. He was passing it along, to someone expecting it today. But Lily wasn't finished. Another message, "Grandma, yes." He just said something else. My throat went dry. "What?" A long pause, then. He said if the old woman starts asking questions, we'll deal with it. The old woman, me. Mark already suspected my curiosity. And whatever this operation was, it was dangerous enough that simply asking questions was a problem. I looked back at the 6 years of transfers sprawled across the table. $300,000. No receipts. No explanation. No transparency. Just envelopes, deadlines. And a man who had just told someone on the phone that curiosity itself was a threat. For the first time, Lily's whisper didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a lifeline. And the financial betrayal I'd feared turned into something darker. Because people don't talk like that unless what they're protecting is serious or powerful. A new, chilling thought settled in my mind. What if Mark wasn't running this operation at all? What if he was just the middleman? And if that were true, the person waiting for those envelopes of cash could be far more dangerous than Mark himself. The weight of what I had uncovered pressed down on me, heavier than grief, heavier than fear. Every transfer, every obedient click of the send button, every whisper of trust I had granted to Mark, funneled into someone else's hands, left a cold void in my chest. I needed perspective. I needed an anchor. Someone who could see through patterns, through manipulation, through the small details I might have missed. I turned to Thomas, my late husband's eldest brother, a man of stoic pragmatism, often distant from family dramas, but with eyes that missed nothing. He had always known when something didn't fit, when the story on the surface hid another beneath. I laid it all bare. Lily's whispered warning, the timeline of transfers, the odd emails, the cash withdrawals, the phone threats. Thomas's face tightened. He didn't speak. He just folded his hands over his chest, staring at the wall as if the story itself were too heavy to process at once. Finally, slowly, he shook his head. "Margaret, this isn't just financial," he said. "This is manipulation, systematic. He's been running you for years." The words settled in my chest like stones. He was right. The man I had trusted, not just as Emily's widower, but as someone I thought I knew intimately, had been orchestrating a game I hadn't realized I was part of. And now, with the black envelope and Lily's observations, the illusion was crumbling faster than I could imagine. Thomas leaned closer, lowering his voice as if speaking too loudly might summon Mark himself. "Mark doesn't just have reach with you," he said. "He's built contingencies. Anyone who touches the money, or even comes close to you or Lily, he monitors. You're not just sending cash. You're feeding a machine that can touch everyone in this family." The thought made my spine stiffen. Every casual interaction I'd taken for granted, birthdays, holidays, conversations about Emily, could now be part of a meticulously observed pattern. Over the next few days, my household became a theater of suspicion. Lily moving quietly through the kitchen, the dog barking at an unusual tone on the phone, the way the mail was collected after transfers. All of it seemed charged with danger. Mark's responses, once casual, now felt preemptive, as though he knew every move I might make. And the ripple effects extended beyond our walls. Distant cousins, family friends, even neighbors. Anyone who had once seemed innocuous now carried an undercurrent of curiosity or unease when Emily's name came up. It became clear. Mark's reach wasn't confined to money. He had inserted himself into the orbit of everyone around us, testing boundaries, manipulating loyalty, watching reactions like a grandmaster playing chess. Then came the first test. Mark called. A seemingly benign check-in about family matters, the holidays, the weather. Calm, warm, familiar. But the undertone was unmistakable. He knew. He knew what I had discovered, what I suspected. He was gauging, probing, measuring my fear without saying a word. I ended the call with a polite, icy tone, hands trembling despite my effort to remain composed. "We'll talk later," I said. Later meant tomorrow, next week, any time I could strategize. Reacting impulsively would feed him. Patience was the weapon I now wielded. That evening, I sat with Lily, her small hands in mine as she recounted the last few weeks. Unusual routes, strange phone calls, interactions with unknown men. Each story painted a mosaic of quiet menace, and I realized our fight was no longer about financial exploitation. It was about safety, integrity, family survival. Our home, once a sanctuary filled with memories of Emily, now felt infiltrated. Every person I trusted was a variable in a game I hadn't realized we were playing. And that whisper from Lily, it had set us on the path to uncovering the truth. After tucking her in, I returned to the desk, surrounded by 6 years of bank statements, emails, photographs. Every file a reminder of what had been taken, of the trust that had been weaponized. And yet, as I plotted the next moves, clarity settled over me. Fear was present, yes, but so was resolve. The quiet war was beginning. For the first time in 6 years, the power felt like it might shift. Mark had built his network, his manipulation, his silent surveillance. But he hadn't accounted for one thing: a grandmother who loved her granddaughter enough to confront shadows, no matter the danger. As I stared at the glowing screen, highlighting his transactions, a plan began to form. Precise, careful, calculated. A strategy that would expose the betrayal, protect Lily, and leave Mark with no opportunity to recover the upper hand. The family's world, built on lies, silences, and careful control, was about to collide with truth. And I would be the one orchestrating the reckoning. The day I had dreaded arrived. Months of careful observation, cross-referencing bank statements, emails, and cryptic receipts, culminated in a moment I could no longer postpone. The house was quiet, Lily at school, sunlight slicing through the blinds like spotlights on the truth. Mark had been meticulous. Every transfer I had made, every check written in Emily's memory, had not nurtured our family or preserved her legacy. It had gone to him, his indulgences, his secret life, his carefully concealed games. I stared at the spreadsheet on my laptop, shaking. Luxury purchases I couldn't even name, airline tickets to unknown locations, deposits into shadow accounts. Every entry screamed audacity. My grief and loyalty had been weaponized into his personal ATM. Rage, betrayal, and sorrow surged through me, mingling into a cold fire I couldn't ignore. Then came the letters, handwritten notes hidden in plain sight, masquerading as reminders of Emily's wishes. Every word carefully crafted to justify lavish expenditures, to frame them as secret charitable works or necessary investments in her memory. The duplicity was astonishing. He had built an entire narrative around my guilt. The deeper I dug, the darker it became. Mark hadn't just siphoned money. He had built a network, accounts, shell corporations, intermediaries. A web woven so subtly that I hadn't even seen it. The realization hit like a punch. For years, my blind devotion had fueled a sophisticated deception, a scheme that had infiltrated everyone I trusted. Shock threatened to paralyze me. Humiliation clawed at my chest. Every transaction, every note, every whispered reassurance had been calculated to exploit me. Mark had tested boundaries, gauged my reactions, and capitalized on grief to accumulate wealth and power. And then, the final blow. Photographs, documents carelessly left exposed. Luxury vacations, fine jewelry for himself, clandestine meetings with unfamiliar names, all funded by money sent in Emily's memory. The grotesque irony was unbearable. He had been thriving while I mourned, obeyed, and trusted blindly. Clarity washed over me, sharp and unrelenting. This was not just financial theft. It was an assault on Emily's memory, an emotional violation, a desecration of trust. Every ounce of loyalty I had given had been weaponized. I drew a deep, deliberate breath. Shock had its place, but resolve had its own. Mark had underestimated me. He believed I would remain passive, continue funneling money, mourning quietly, trusting blindly. Fatal mistake. Grief could sharpen into strategy. Love for family could become armor and blade. I began planning meticulously. Notes taken, files cross-checked, timelines mapped. Every interaction with Mark over the years, calls, letters, receipts, was being analyzed. Understanding his patterns, predicting his moves, identifying his weaknesses, that was now my domain. The psychological duel was far from over, but for the first time in years, the upper hand had shifted. I felt control. The architecture of his lies was visible. His audacity, cunning, and precision, impressive but not infallible. Every oversight, every misstep catalogued in my mind. Soon, he would feel the weight of exposure. And yet, stakes had never been higher. Mark was dangerous, capable of manipulation beyond the obvious. One wrong move could backfire catastrophically. Adrenaline surged, tempered by strategy. Fear and resolve merged into vigilance. Lily's small voice echoed from the other room. Her careful steps reminded me why this mattered. She had whispered the truth, pierced the veil, and shown me the path forward. Protecting her became my anchor, my compass. Every decision, every risk, every plan centered on her. By nightfall, a strategy had formed. The confrontation would not be rash. It would be deliberate, intelligent, undeniable. Mark's network, his manipulations, his psychological games, all would be laid bare. Emily's memory would be honored. Lily's future safeguarded. The chapter of silence, of unquestioned trust, had ended. The full betrayal had been revealed. And as I closed the ledger, the evidence, and my notes, a cold, exhilarating truth settled over me. Mark had made one fatal error, underestimating a grandmother who had learned to watch, to listen, and to plan. The war was fully in motion. The game had escalated. And this time I would not lose. By the weekend, Mark's betrayal pressed down like a living weight. The house, once filled with Lily's laughter, felt tense, haunted by the invisible threads of his manipulation. I was preparing for a confrontation that had been simmering since the discoveries of the past weeks, but this was no ordinary argument. Mark wasn't just deceitful. He was cunning, intuitive, and dangerously charming. For years, he had trained me to trust him, making obedience feel like honoring Emily. That trust was a weapon. Now I was stepping into a battlefield where he anticipated every move. I documented everything meticulously. Every transfer, every cryptic email, every unexplained receipt. Each line in my spreadsheet was a thread I could pull to unravel the web Mark had built. But anxiety gnawed at me. One misstep, a false accusation, a misinterpreted receipt, and he could cast me as the paranoid grandmother, the overprotective widow imagining threats where none existed. The stakes were personal, immediate, and high. Mark's subtle manipulations intensified as if he sensed the shift. Calls became persuasive, laced with veiled threats under reassurances. "I'm only trying to make sure Emily's memory is honored," he would say, his voice smooth, almost hypnotic. Each interaction was psychological chess, both of us measuring, positioning, waiting for the other to reveal weakness. Small anomalies confirmed my suspicions. Bank alerts out of sync with his explanations, encrypted emails with attachments I wasn't meant to see, intercepted texts to unknown contacts. He was clever but not infallible. His confidence was his weakness. He had assumed grief, loyalty, and duty would blind me. Now, staying several moves ahead was the only way to counter him. The tension seeped into Lily's world. She became observant, cautious, her innocence replaced with quiet vigilance that mirrored my own. Protecting her became paramount. Every plan I formulated included contingencies to shield her from emotional and psychological fallout. Near misses kept me on edge. Unexpected arrivals, unannounced visits, casual remarks hinting he knew I was onto him. Once I saw him lingering near my car, smiling, friendly, calculating. Another time, a package arrived, luxury gift inside, paired with a note designed to guilt me into compliance. Each incident underscored that the confrontation had to be precise, undeniable, airtight. Mark's routines shifted subtly. Late meetings with unknown individuals, sudden unexplained trips, evasive answers to simple questions. Always 2 steps ahead, until now. I ran constant simulations in my mind, predicting his maneuvers, anticipating excuses, preparing for deflections. Fear, anger, adrenaline, they merged into a relentless focus. I realized something crucial. Mark's greatest advantage was his confidence in control. He believed grief and duty would bind me forever. But observation, patience, and strategic thinking born of necessity were my weapons. Every slip he had made, every piece of evidence I'd collected could be leveraged, not recklessly, but with precision. By evening, clarity set in. The confrontation required preparation. Witnesses, irrefutable evidence, contingencies for manipulation or intimidation. Stakes extended beyond money. They encompassed trust, family integrity, Lily's safety. The strike would not be emotional. It would be calculated, dismantling his scheme while protecting what mattered most. And yet, uncertainty lingered. Mark was unpredictable. Humans under pressure are irrational. Any miscalculation could tip the balance. Every word, every move in the coming days mattered. By nightfall, I knew this. The war had escalated beyond the shadows of deception. Mark was now a present, dangerous adversary. I was ready. Every betrayal, every sleepless night analyzing patterns, every moment of doubt had honed me. The game had intensified, the pieces set, the checkmate within reach, but only if executed flawlessly. The house was quiet, but the storm had begun. Every breath was measured, every thought a calculated maneuver. The psychological battlefield was set. Soon, Mark would confront not just evidence, but the unyielding resolve of a grandmother who refused to be outplayed. The war had escalated. Nothing would ever be the same. The day of reckoning arrived, heavy and silent, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Weeks of meticulous preparation had led to this moment. Every email cross-checked, every transfer cataloged, every receipt, every interaction that could expose Mark's deception. Nothing was left to chance. This confrontation would not be a shouting match. It had to be surgical, undeniable, a culmination of strategy and precision. I arranged for a neutral witness, our family attorney Helen, whose calm presence would prevent any twisting of the narrative. Mark arrived, smiling, the practiced charm in his voice and posture attempting to assert dominance. He greeted me as if he still held control. But today, his charm held no power. I was armed with facts, evidence, and a deep understanding of his patterns. I noted the tiny shifts in his posture, the micro-expressions of unease he could not mask. I began calmly, laying out the timeline. Each $50,000 transfer, supposedly honoring Emily, traced meticulously. Discrepancies highlighted. Emails revealing urgency disguised as guilt, receipts contradicting explanations, messages subtly pressuring blind trust. Helen nodded occasionally, taking notes, a quiet anchor of authority. Mark laughed lightly, attempting to diffuse the tension with humor. "You've always been meticulous, Margaret," he said, masking panic. I did not falter. The evidence spoke for itself. The envelope Lily had seen him hand over, the mysterious withdrawals, the secret purchases, all laid bare. With each revelation, the mask of confidence cracked. I shifted to the psychological, gaslighting, guilt, emotional manipulation. Subtle questioning of judgment when clarity was sought. Mark's facade wavered. Eyes darted. Hands clenched. His voice occasionally rose. This was no longer just financial. It was about trust, memory, and the exploitation of grief. Desperate, he appealed to sentiment. "Margaret, think about Emily. Think about honoring her wishes." His voice trembled, attempting to frame me as paranoid. Helen interrupted firmly. "We are here to review documented actions, not emotions. Facts will dictate the outcome." I presented the clinching evidence. Secret accounts, undisclosed expenses, 6 years of deceit meticulously laid out. I saw the dawning realization in his eyes. He had underestimated patience, observation, and strategic planning. His charm, manipulation, and deception were useless now. Every move he had made to control me had been anticipated and countered. The climax was almost cinematic. Lily's observations, the whispered confession that had sparked the investigation, were laid out. Mark's composure shattered. Explanations became fragmented and contradictory. The room was heavy with tension, charged with the satisfaction of exposing a manipulator while protecting those I loved. No yelling, no chaos, only the slow, undeniable collapse of a carefully constructed world. Finally, I delivered the decisive blow: legal and financial measures preventing him from accessing Emily's inheritance. Justice, precise, emotionally satisfying, strategically executed. Mark could see the shift in power was irreversible. I was no longer the grieving widow. I was a force capable of outmaneuvering him at every turn. Silence fell. Mark slumped into a chair, defeated. Helen closed the final document, cementing the outcome. Beside me, Lily's wide eyes reflected quiet pride. Together, we had reclaimed something far greater than money or evidence. We had reclaimed integrity, safety, and family honor. As we left the office, clarity replaced exhaustion. The confrontation had been brutal in its psychological intensity, but necessary. Mark's manipulations were undone. The threat neutralized. For the first time in years, the shadow hovering over our family lifted. This confrontation was more than a conclusion. It was a declaration. Deceit and manipulation could no longer dictate our lives. The aftermath of the confrontation was a strange mix of relief and vigilance. Mark had been exposed, yet his presence lingered like a shadow in every corner of the house. For days, I moved through our home with heightened awareness, checking locks, reviewing accounts, and reminding Lily that vigilance didn't mean fear. It meant empowerment. Control, long eroded by Mark's subtle manipulations, was slowly returning. Not just financial control, but emotional, strategic, deeply personal authority. I set firm boundaries for anyone involved with Emily's legacy, understanding that protection required clarity and uncompromising rules. Lily, once burdened with uncertainty, began to regain her own sense of safety. She asked questions freely, unafraid to challenge assumptions, no longer constrained by the quiet intimidation Mark had instilled. Watching her confidence blossom was a small but profound victory. Reclaiming control wasn't only about undoing Mark's influence. It was about restoring natural order, truth, and the right for our family to feel secure. I reached out carefully to relatives and close friends, explaining the situation with precision, without sensationalism. Transparency became a shield against further deception. Each conversation reinforced authority and trust. Disbelief at Mark's schemes, relief that we had acted in time, admiration for the measured way I had navigated the confrontation. Slowly, the family's equilibrium returned, anchored in clarity rather than fear. Control, however, was as much internal as external. I reflected on how grief and misplaced trust had allowed Mark's manipulation to persist. Examining these vulnerabilities fortified my resilience, transforming pain into strategic clarity. I could finally honor Emily's memory with gratitude, not shadowed by exploitation. Practical measures followed. I established joint oversight for future transactions, involved trusted professionals, and implemented safeguards to prevent unilateral decisions. These weren't mere formalities. They symbolized the transition from passive victim to strategic authority. Mark's psychological grip was neutralized. The tactics he once relied on were countered by structure, awareness, and legal reinforcement. Emotionally, I embraced moments of connection with Lily. We shared memories, laughed at Emily's quirks, and reclaimed joy from grief. These moments were as vital as any legal measure, converting the weight of betrayal into clarity, resolve, and protection. Even in victory, caution remained. Mark might attempt subtle manipulations, legal or personal, to regain influence. Vigilance was the final layer of control, not revenge but prevention. Every measure sent a clear message. Deceit would be scrutinized, manipulation resisted, and our family fortified. In quiet evenings, I watched Lily reading or playing, sensing the first true normalcy in years. The house, once heavy with tension, now breathed security, laughter, and order. Redemption had been achieved, not only of circumstances, but of the psychological equilibrium Mark had threatened. Shadows were replaced by truth, vigilance, and reclaimed authority. By the end, the stakes were unmistakable. Margaret had neutralized Mark's manipulation, protected her granddaughter, and restored trust and control. Victory was real, but alive, requiring constant attention. Psychological battles are never static. They demand intelligence, awareness, and unyielding resolve. And we were ready. Even after Mark was exposed and control reclaimed, a quiet unease lingered in the house like an uninvited guest. The immediate threat had passed, but the psychological residue remained. Every phone call, every knock, even a stranger walking past the windows could spark a flicker of anxiety. Years of misplaced trust had left an indelible mark. Vigilance was no longer optional. It was survival. I felt it in my bones whenever Lily laughed too loudly or exchanged a knowing glance. Even in calm moments, the shadow of betrayal loomed, a silent reminder that danger can hide in familiarity. I fortified our defenses. Accounts once entrusted to Mark now had dual oversight. Every transaction, no matter how small, was logged and monitored. Lawyers, advisors, and professionals were engaged not only to safeguard finances, but to ensure that Lily and I could never again be blindsided. The realization was suffocating. Someone so close had quietly exploited grief, loyalty, and love. Revisiting past interactions with Mark became a painful excavation. What had been care, and what had been manipulation? I also prepared Lily for the realities of trust. Gently, carefully, I guided her through the lessons I had learned. People sometimes hide things, and it isn't your fault, I told her. She listened, wide-eyed, absorbing the subtle strategies for discernment, resilience, and self-protection. Empowerment became our shield. The vulnerabilities Mark had once exploited were being neutralized by awareness, intelligence, and psychological readiness. Daily life carried subtle reminders of the past. Suspicious emails, unexpected packages, ambiguous calls, they all tested my patience and vigilance. Each time, I forced myself to pause, analyze, and respond deliberately rather than react impulsively. The contrast between past blind trust and present calculated awareness was stark. Every precaution we took became a psychological fortress, built from the ashes of betrayal. The danger wasn't only external. It lived inside, a quiet paranoia born of trauma. Every shadowed glance, unexplained absence, or unknown variable prompted careful calculations. Trust became measured. Every potential threat had to be recognized before it could take hold. This balance, between caution and engagement, became our new normal, a continuous vigilance shaping every choice. And then there was the haunting truth. Mark, or someone like him, had been bold enough to exploit grief, love, and loyalty. If he ever returned, he would adapt, innovate, and try again. That possibility cast a long shadow, a constant reminder that true security required precision, awareness, and deliberate action at all times. Yet, amidst the fear, empowerment had taken root. I had transformed grief into strategy, betrayal into vigilance, and fear into resilience. Lily learned alongside me, discovering the importance of discernment, the value of questioning appearances, and the necessity of protecting oneself and loved ones. Together, we had turned trauma into education, restoring authority over our lives. The story closes on a subtle, haunting note. Those we trust most can deceive us in ways we never imagined. Even when immediate danger is gone, the memory of betrayal shapes every glance, every decision, every precaution. Safety is not static. It is an ongoing act of intelligence, foresight, and unwavering determination. Margaret and Lily had reclaimed control, but the lesson remained clear. Vigilance is forever. Months had passed since the confrontation, but the lessons lingered, etched into every corner of the house and every habit I had built. The air was lighter now, but vigilance remained, a subtle rhythm in our daily lives. Locks were checked, accounts monitored, emails scanned with practiced care. Nothing was left to chance, but the fear that had once consumed me had been replaced with something far stronger: clarity, control, and unshakable resolve. Lily had blossomed in ways that made my chest ache with pride. No longer hesitant or fearful, she moved through the house with quiet confidence. She asked questions freely, weighed answers, and learned to see beyond appearances. Together, we had rebuilt not just our routines, but the unspoken rules of safety, trust, and integrity that would guide our lives going forward. Where once her small shoulders bore the weight of uncertainty, they now carried curiosity, intelligence, and discernment. Our home had transformed. Laughter returned, genuine and unguarded. Stories of Emily were shared openly, her memory honored without manipulation or shadow. The photographs, letters, and keepsakes that once felt like instruments of pain had become instruments of remembrance, connecting us to the life we cherished and the legacy we protected. Each memory was a thread, weaving us back into the safety and warmth that had been threatened for so long. Professionally, legally, and financially, we were secure. Every measure, oversight, safeguards, and checks ensured that Mark's influence could never return. And yet, the greatest victory was intangible: the restoration of agency. I moved through the world with awareness, tempered by experience, and Lily had learned alongside me. Together, we were no longer passive participants in the lives of others. We were architects of our own safety, authors of our own decisions. Still, the shadow of the past lingered, not as fear, but as a quiet reminder of vigilance. I taught Lily that life's dangers often hide in plain sight, that trust must be earned, and that resilience is built in the moments when courage meets strategy. And she listened, absorbing lessons I had learned through grief, betrayal, and quiet observation. In the evenings, we would sit together by the window, the sun casting golden light across the room. She would tell me about her day, share little victories and discoveries, and sometimes ask questions that revealed a mind already practicing discernment. I answered with care, guiding her without imposing fear, and in those moments the full circle of our struggle became clear. We had survived, we had reclaimed what was ours, and we were stronger for it. The world remained unpredictable, and people capable of deception existed beyond these walls. But within this home, in this family, vigilance, love, and strategy had created a sanctuary. The lessons of the past would never be forgotten, but neither would the victories. The knowledge that even in the face of manipulation, grief, and betrayal, control could be restored, integrity could be reclaimed, and a family could endure. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the house, I felt a quiet peace. Not complacency, not naivety, but power, awareness, preparedness. The story of betrayal had ended, and in its place rose a story of resilience, strategy, and the unyielding bond between grandmother and granddaughter. And in that bond, I knew, lay our true protection, stronger than any manipulation, unassailable by deceit, and enduring as long as we chose to honor it.